All right. Evening, everyone. Welcome back to another Peaceful Solution Character Education Teacher Training course here as we are continuing in. Please be seated if you are standing. We are continuing in the character unit, the intermediate series, junior high unit. We're on chapter 3, and we're talking about the making of a VIP. And this is a very powerful chapter. Of course, all the chapters in the Peaceful Solution are very powerful, but it's one of my most honored chapters because it talks a lot about influences. And of course, like the previous teacher William was talking about, you know, it's hard to understand about the different influences that affect us on a daily basis until we're educated about it. There are a lot of organizations, there are a lot of companies that firms that focus on influencing people to make certain decisions, to buy things and so forth. And what we're concerned about here, just give me a second. What we're concerned about here is how these influences affect our character. How they affect our character in developing either a positive or a negative character. So let's see here. Last class, we were talking about music. How many of you, just by show of hands, like music? I think we all do, right? Music. And we don't sometimes realize the importance of music and how it affects us in a positive or a negative way, but it does. And if you don't understand that music can affect you in your modes, your moods, the way you look at certain things, certain movements that have taken place over the years, like the civil rights movements, human rights movements, things like that. They affect the way people think and feel about certain issues, right? And in certain circumstances or situations, there have been songs that have been developed and revolve around the movements of, like I said, I remember one of the things that was addressed was the starvation, right? The starvation that was taking place in some of the African countries. And, back in the 80s, they had a big production of a lot of different artists that, put out a song about We Are the World, basically talking about how we're all human beings here. The only race is the human race, and we all need to work together to build and support and to take care of one another. And some of these songs, remember, these things fall down into two categories: music, influences, the things that we see on television, the movies, television shows. Now they've got podcasts and video games. A lot has changed over the last 20 years, but all these things fall into two basic categories: positive or negative, okay? And so it's important for us to understand the difference between the two because, just give me a second here, I want to make a quick wardrobe change there. They affect us in either a positive or a negative way. And of course, this is what we were talking about: lights, camera, action. And these things fall into the category of influences, right? Entertainment, music, video games, movies, plays. A lot of people go to plays. They go to performances, operas. They go to, that. Of course, all this stuff now has been shut down because of COVID-19. But all these things fall into the category of entertainment, which is a form of influences, of course. Before we get started here, I want to jump back here to page 55 just to kind of reset the stage here and what we're talking about, and kind of refresh our mind from what was covered at the very beginning of this chapter. On page 55, at the bottom paragraph there, it says, measure yourself by the things you value. And it says, we live in a world of constant interaction. I remember those interactions They help to make up our experiences, right? Whether they're positive or negative. I mean, when we interact, we're interacting with people, whether they're in our own family, whether they're in our own neighborhood, at school, at work. These are interactions, and they're based off of our experiences. These interactions influence the way we think, feel, act, and ultimately what we value. And we covered a lot on page, I believe, 6 of values in the first chapter there, and how important values are in shaping our character, right? Because those are some of the very key factors that are formed at the very beginning of our lives, our elemental or our formative years, our family values, because our parents, our families, our siblings, and so forth, they're very essential in the shaping of our character, and we adopt values from them growing up as a child. And as we start to seek acceptance outside the home or start to move outside the family, then we will start to adopt new values. And as we get older and our experiences and our environment change, our values will change as a result. And that's totally fine, but the key thing to remember is that it's important to always measure your values based on moral principles, right? You don't want your values to take a step back that would affect your character in a way negatively, affect your character, impact your character in a way that you start to let go or lose sight of or no longer practice the moral principles that you have learned. It says influences can have either a positive or negative effect on our character. It is up to you to be aware of how these influences will affect what you value and your choice to obtain a positive character. And of course, the main kind of the focus that we're talking about here, excuse me, are influences and the different sources that they come from. Let's see here. So the previous teachers talked a little bit about, influences and where they come from, how influences either positively or negatively affect some people. We went over some examples on page 59 of a report of a 10 and a 12-year-old charged with robbing a bank. On page 60, we talked about how influences are all around us. In fact, rereading the definition in the last paragraph of last sentence of the first paragraph on page 60, it says an influence is something or someone, excuse me, something or someone that has the ability to affect your attitude, way of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Okay, an attitude is basically how you think and feel about, a particular thing, a person or subject. It's funny because, in questioning people, sometimes you'll say to them, as you see, if you work around people over a period of time, you kind of get to know them. You kind of get to know their demeanor, their personality, and so forth. And if you work around children enough, you notice that when you make mention or possibly correct them at times in things that they're doing, their attitude will change, right? And they'll go from a kind of a balanced type attitude to a kind of a down and a sad looking attitude. And then sometimes they could be kind of snarky if they don't like the correction, because sometimes people don't like correction. And you make the statement, why do you have that attitude? And you'll get the response, I don't have an attitude. And you're like, yeah, you do have an attitude. Everybody has an attitude. It could be positive or it could be negative, but you do have an attitude. Now, my question is, why is yours negative, right? And so people don't think about these things because attitude is something that's with us all the time. We always display some type of an attitude. It could be a positive one or it could be a negative one. And we have to evaluate at times if we do have a negative attitude as adults and as teachers. We want to take into consideration, why is it that I feel and think this way about this person? Or when this person comes around, my attitude changes, or when I'm in this environment, my attitude changes, right? And try to consider what influential factors are there that is affecting that, okay? And that's the part of being educated. The previous teacher mentioned we're never going to stop learning, right? We're always going to be continually educating ourselves. And one of the things, the benefits that come out of that is we're always going to be learning things about ourselves as we learn new information. And, just like what we're talking about here in regards to influences. They're things that we've learned about ourselves and not realizing how we responded to certain possibly subtle influences that came into our lives, and it caused us to act a certain way or caused us to think a certain way, which led to a certain attitude or a certain action or the way we carried ourselves and so forth. It says here in the second paragraph on page 60, toward the bottom there, the last sentence again, it says, everything you hear, experience, and see, as well as every interaction and conversation that you are a part of, have the potential to change the way you think and feel about the things you value. Okay? And so this again is why it's important to, you kind of, you can't go out into society, and you have to, as you teach the students about understanding influences and the importance of, we'll get into the future chapter here, the importance of maintaining a positive character. You can't go out. You do kind of have to be a little bit defensive in the way you think when you interact with society, because the fact is, I would probably say 99% of society is not learning to develop a positive character right now. So even though it might be unintentional, there are going to be negative influences that come from that society, from people in society, right? It might even be people in their families, because they don't realize it, because they haven't been educated in these things. So, you do have to be on guard in regards to the things that that are in your environment, the interactions that you come into contact with, or the experiences that you have. And in doing so, it'll help you better be able to differentiate between what's right and wrong, what's beneficial to you and the student, and what's harmful, to you and the student, and to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative. And of course, again, that comes with education, and then taking what we've been taught and putting it into practice on a consistent daily basis. Because if we don't, it's the old saying, if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And this is very prominent even physically, right? If you've ever seen somebody who, or you yourself, have ever been injured and you've been bedridden for a long period of time, and you can't get out of bed, you're in traction or something like that, or sometimes people who are in comas and they're laid up pretty much for weeks or months, their muscles start to atrophy, right? They start to get weaker, and they shrink because they're not using them on a consistent basis. One of the things that make our bones strong, besides for calcium and sunlight and vitamin D and so forth, is impact. The gravity, the Earth's gravity, and that force helps to strengthen and densify our bones. Trees grow strong in wind and so forth. And so, all these things are necessary. The use of the things we learn are necessary, and sometimes having a little bit of one of the teachers mentioned about real world test, what we might see as opposition, somebody opposing our values. Don't look at it as something as a negative thing in regards to you've got to respond harshly. Look at it as an opportunity to put into practice the principles that you've learned from the peaceful solution, right? You don't have to retaliate, with the peaceful solution. you don't retaliate, but you put into practice the things you've learned. So always look at what you learned, or situations that you might be in that will test your knowledge or test your ability to put these concepts into practice. Look at them as opportunities to improve and strengthen your character, as well as giving you the opportunity to impart some type of knowledge to somebody else that might help them to learn something that they didn't about the peaceful solution. And our students can do this as well, because they're going to be interacting with peers. It doesn't matter if they're 13 years old or if they're 35 years old. They're going to be interacting with peers on a daily basis. So they should be also looking at the opportunity to impart knowledge, whether it's through their words or through their actions, to their fellow peers. And at the very bottom of page 60, it says, influences can come in all different sizes. They can be positive or negative, subtle or bold. But the one thing they all have in common is They all have the ability to affect what you value and affect your character in either a positive or negative way. Okay? And then this interesting point here at the bottom of page 61, under more than you realize, it says, knowing what you value will help you to decide what to allow yourself to be influenced by and what to ignore. Because you're not going to necessarily stop an influence from coming into your mind, right? No more than you can drive down the road with your eyes closed on the interstate, so that you don't see any negative influences. Because there's, billboards along the side of the interstate, especially the closer you get to a city, right? You're going to see more billboards. Out way far out in the country, you're really not going to see a billboard because there's nothing to really, influence you to go and buy something or do something, a call to action, except possibly just drive safely, put your cell phone away or something like that. But the closer you get to cities where there are stores and establishments that want you to spend money, you're going to see a lot more billboards. And sometimes companies use kind of negative ways to influence their customers, suggestive ways to influence their customers to use their service or stop into their store or buy their product. I've seen some interesting things here, even in the city of Abilene that would be considered reputable companies. I would think that they would be considered long-time reputable companies that put out a series of advertisements that didn't necessarily show something that would, place a negative thought in a person's mind, but the way that the wording was placed, it made it very suggestive, right? And anybody who was old enough would know that, this is suggesting, this thing or the other, right? And they were using it kind of as probably trying to be funny, as a light way to draw attention to their company or service. But in fact, that was a negative influence, okay? And the only way you would recognize something, like most people will look at that and go, that's so funny, those guys, But the only way you will recognize something like that is if you were educated to recognize the difference between the two. And that's why we emphasize over and over and over and over in the Peaceful Solution why education is so, so important. When you leave high school, you're just taking kind of the foundation of what you learned and starting to apply it into your adulthood. So that kind of leads us up to where we are right now in regards to, we talked a little bit about violence and TV and video games on 64 and page 65, and you had an opportunity to look at a little bit of lights, camera, action activity on page 66, and here we are on page 67 with the music, because like we talked about, everybody in here, everybody that I know of, everybody that I've interacted with, everybody loves some type of music, right? Some type of music. And music is very influential, very powerful. In fact, let's go back to page LP3, and we're going to reread that procedure again. LP3D. And we're going to look at procedure 7. And it says here, discuss the importance of music within our culture. Tell students that music has been used as a way to express emotions and opinions for thousands of years. So it's not something that's just new, that's just come up. I mean, probably since the beginning of time, it'd be safe to say that music has been used to influence things, influence people, express opinions, like it says here, and emotions. Music has the ability to influence the way we feel, which affects the way we behave. Because remember, as we learn, thoughts lead to feelings, and feelings lead to actions. And then, of course, this is part of what was covered last class. Have students read the sections Do, Re, Mi, and Music and Violence, found on page 67 and 68 in their handbooks. Then divide class, which is something that as a teacher you can do in that setting of a classroom. You can set aside a period of time where the students can participate in this activity and engage their minds in what they've learned regarding music and its influence. Have students discuss some of the popular songs and lyrics, and instruct students to use the activity sheet at the bottom of page 67 to answer the questions indicated. This is going to be part of what we're covering here today. And, one thing I was thinking about, let's just read back here at the top of page 67. We'll back up a little bit and recover what William covered from the last class. Under Do, Re, Mi on page 67, it says, let's talk about music. Can music influence your character? Well, the answer is yes. The music industry is a huge money-making business. And with any business, they're going to formulate their products, because music can be considered a product. They're going to formulate their products based on what's going to sell the most, right? This is a statement that says, sex sells, and you see that used in a lot of advertisements, from cars to music to houses, to almost the most innocent thing you might think is innocent. In some way, marketers or marketing companies will put that into an advertisement because they know that really catches the eye or catches the attention of the viewers. In regards to, it's not as big as it used to be 20 years ago, but newspapers, like we mentioned before, one of the statements that editors use: if it bleeds, it leads. If it's something that it seems to be gruesome, or some type of heinous crime, or somebody else's suffering as a result of something that took place in their life, and it's going to get people to buy the newspaper, they put that on the front page. It makes headlines, right? And so companies will advertise things irregardless of the negative impact that it might have on the consumer, for the sole purpose of making money. Most companies. Now that's not across the board everybody, but most companies, a lot of companies. Millions of dollars are spent every year on CDs and cassettes by teens like you. And I was thinking a little bit earlier before class, I was thinking, it's interesting, like, of course, this is, back in 2003 here, and CDs were probably, they were still pretty popular. We started to transition from Walkman to Discman, with the portable CD players. And I was thinking, before that, before the cassettes, I think you kind of had like the 8 tracks, and before that it was more like, as far as cassette type thing, it was a reel-to-reel player, and then you had record players. Before that you had the phonograph, and so the way that music was able to be brought into the home, because before that people would have to actually go out to a play, or to a musical, or to an opera or something like that, to actually watch these shows live, or actually to a concert. But before these things change, as technology has increased, the ways in which we get these influences have become a lot easier, right? And so our dependence upon those things as well has changed. And so one thing you'll see is that the methods by which influences are brought into the mind or the eyes of the public or the consumers, or how, depending on which side you're presenting it, it might change, but the concepts that we're talking about here, the principles that we're talking about here, they remain the same. Irregardless of whether it's coming from a cassette player, or whether it's being streamed or downloaded directly from the internet or some type of social media platform, you still have to be able to differentiate. Your students have to still be able to differentiate whether that influence is positive and negative, and how is it going to affect the things that they value. Okay, one day they might be able to stream it right into their brain. I don't know. It really doesn't matter. The question that they have to always take into consider is, how is this going to affect my character? So it says, from rhythm and blues to alternative, heavy metal, and rock, music is an important part of life and has been influencing people for thousands of years. Music has the ability to affect our emotions, and the emotions affect the way we act. All right, and so this is where we pick up today in the second paragraph. I just wanted to make mention here. I mentioned earlier about televisions, TVs, movies, video games, music, and things of that nature falling into the category of entertainment. And I looked up this word entertain, and of course it's from I'll give the Latin here, inter and tenere. I think that's how it's pronounced, and it means among and also to hold. And the late Middle English of this word, from French, entretenir, based on Latin inter and tenere, or to hold, it's the word originally meant maintain, continue. Later, it meant maintain in a certain condition. Maintain in a certain condition. Treat in a certain way. And it also, because it can mean several different things, right? To welcome to my home, and let me entertain you, or, also it can mean like to entertain a question, right? To welcome a question. To show hospitality. It also means to show hospitality. But this first part was the interesting thing here. It to maintain in a certain condition, or to hold the mind, right? The author of The Peaceful Solution made a statement a long time ago in regards to seminar in children, in regards to children and television, right? You can have a room full of children that you can be talking to them, and they could be running around the room, jumping all over everything, climbing all up the walls, on top of the refrigerator, into the cookie jar, and you turn on the television, and all of a sudden, they're sitting on the sofa, like they're entranced, all these colors and things dancing and things like that on the front of the, and it necessarily doesn't have to be a television. We do a lot of, when we're going to a lot of schools, and we went to a lot of the elementary schools, one of the things we did was we put on Peaceful Solution puppet shows at that time, and boy, they all quieted down at that time, and they wanted to hear everything those puppets were saying at that time, even though they weren't really talking, right? But in the child's mind, it was something that caught their attention, and it held it there for a period of time. And so, just keep that in your mind, or entertain that thought in regards to the things that are presented from televisions, from movies, and from music. It's meant to maintain a certain condition, to hold your mind to think in a certain way. And that's what we're learning in the Peaceful Solution. We want to, and we do have the ability to better control the way we think, right? We can't control the music industry. We can't control all the influences that we might come into contact with on a daily basis, but we can control the way we think. We can control the way we respond. We can control what we hold on to, what influences we hold on to, and what influences we choose to let go. Okay, and so that's so important that you impress that in the students' minds, that the only thing that they have control over is themselves and how they respond. So it says here in the second paragraph on page 67, some music is used to help young children learn. Words put to melody or rhythm are easier to remember. And I think every single one of us that went to school, or even if we didn't go to school at an early age, and we learned basic alphabets and reading and so forth, most of us learned our ABCs from the ABC song, right? And I don't have to sing the ABC song for everybody to remember what it was, but that's pretty much an across-the-board thing. And because of that, when we do the ABCs, we can still do the ABC song some 30, 40, 60, 70 years later, right? The only thing I can't do with my ABCs, I like if we would have taught me the ABCs backwards, because I got to do it forwards to get the letter before when I go backwards. I still can't do that yet. But these things are put to words to help the student learn. It helps them to learn faster. In fact, it was interesting because I looked up, because I've heard it before, and I looked up some information in regards to certain music, positive music, and the effects on the brain. And I think, a lot of you, I know a lot of you are educated, and you probably heard about this or read about it yourself, but for some reason, Stanford and a lot of other colleges and institutions have put in a lot of research in regards to certain types of music, in regards to classical music, right? Not necessarily music with words, but a combination of instruments and how it impacts the mind of students, because they actually did a trial run of students and playing music while they were studying, or that it was in the room while the professor was teaching, and saw the effects in memory and their ability to recall information, which is memory, and retain and comprehend information while they had classical music playing in the background. Even if they didn't listen to it or focus on it, it still affected it. It says these studies indicate, and this is from obscuresound.com. This was from 2019, and I just took an excerpt here. I didn't want to read the whole thing. It says these studies indicate that classical music helps improve your memory. Listening to classical music increases the brainwave activity, which has a direct link to your memory. And that was a study from July 23rd, 2019. And so one of the things that we might not realize, and a lot of people probably do, and we talked a little bit about colors, but everything has a frequency, and those frequencies affect our brain. Music has a frequency. We talked about rhythm, melody and rhythm, right? And I'm not a musician, but a lot of things are in rhythms of 1, 2s, 3s, and 4s, and so forth. And I think they go even higher than that. I'm not very sure, but rhythm, this definition of rhythm is an ordered, recurrent alternation of strong and weak elements in the flow of sound and silence in speech. So not just the sound, but the breaks as well. 1, 2, 3, right? And so that's kind of a rhythm there. And so these things are used to help people learn at times in regards to schools and ABCs and a lot of different things. Children learn about their states. They learn about names of presidents. They learn about capitals. A lot of these things are put to songs. And it says, this is why ABCs are sung as well as many other children's songs. Sexually explicit and violent lyrics, or lyrics promoting drug use, are all sung or rapped to a great beat, right? And I think most of us, when we hear a great beat, even before any words come on, and it's something that gets to us, a type of music or genre that we like, most of us, without even realizing it, we'll start we start moving our heads, we start bopping our head, because and what are we doing? We're bopping our head to the beat. We're bopping our head to the rhythm, right? And that's how powerful music is. Not even one word was ever said, right? Nobody said, hey, listen to this song. You might just be sitting in your car, just sitting there thinking, and you're, somebody's in the car next to you, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, what am I doing here? And that's just how powerful music and the beats and the rhythms and so forth. There's frequencies that are used in songs, and certain frequencies, both high and low frequencies. In classical music, there's a lot of high frequencies. And high frequencies, there's a study that shows how high frequencies are actually considered to be food for the brain. Food for the brain. They energize it, stimulate it, make it alert, and enable it to focus and remember. Okay. Now that's not to say that high frequencies can't be used to promote negative things in music or to grab your attention in a way to promote a negative message, because what we're going to learn here, or what we're focusing on here, is not just the music or the tone itself, but also the lyrics that are being presented in the song, right? Because if they can get you to bop your head to a great beat, then they can throw anything in there that they want, if they've got your attention, until you recognize, whoa, wait a minute, I don't really like the message that's being presented here. I'm going to turn that off or turn the channel, right? And so this is what this is talking about here. These things are all rapped or sung to a great beat. Now, just because you can tap your feet, dance, or enjoy it with your friends doesn't change the power of the message, right? And that message is what's important, right? To be able to differentiate between whether that message is harmful or beneficial. Like we talked about personality and character, right? And how music kind of falls into that category of personality. And sometimes people might think that, well, that's just my personality. Who cares if I, like to listen to, cop killer music, or, whatever this is that talks about doing drugs or shooting somebody. What's the difference? But remember, these things are influences that can affect our values. And anything that can affect our value has the ability to affect our character. So we can't totally differentiate personality from character, because they go hand in hand in shaping our overall person. If your personality is to listen to music that is bringing harm to other people, right? Well, that's a negative influence, right? That's something negative that we need to work on eliminating from our value system. So it doesn't change the message that is being processed in your mind and stored in your subconscious mind. And we talked a little bit previously about subconscious mind, and there's a lot of information on the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind, science has found, it never forgets. It never forgets. Even things you did not intentionally put into your subconscious mind, it's stored there. There's been studies where people have been hypnotized, 40, 50 years later, and they were able to recall everything in their environment when they were just a mere child, not paying attention to anything. But, through that hypnosis, they were able to, recall the weather, recall what mom and dad was doing, how they felt that day, what they were wearing. All those things are stored in our subconscious mind, right? And we don't realize it, but sometimes our subconscious mind feeds back to us, and, it can influence us to do and act in a certain way. So it's very important that we continually work on storing up positive things consciously, work on storing positive things in our mind, so that will be what we're building up and storing in our subconscious mind. So in a moment of distress, when we have to act on instinct, what will be fed back to us are the positive things, the beneficial, the healthy things that we've learned from the peaceful solution, and not some impulsive, harmful choice that can make the situation worse for us or somebody else. And that's the importance of not only educating ourselves, but valuing the things we educate, right? Because that kind of solidifies or helps the information to take root, deep root in our hearts and our minds, when we value greatly desire the information that we're receiving, and we make it important to ourselves. It says, so ask yourself, how do you think listening to songs with explicit lyrics affects your character? And of course, this right here at the bottom, this is an activity that will be done in the class, and you break them up into group of 3s or 4s, and you would discuss in the group the lyrics to popular songs of your choice. And and they could discuss anything, because there's a lot of different songs, a lot of different genres today that children listen to. When I was growing up, I don't think much has changed in regards to rap and classical and R&B and rock and roll and things of that nature in country. But a lot of that's going to be based on the environment, what they grew up in, or their culture and things of that nature. But allow them to discuss songs allow them to discuss these songs of their choice. And then the questions that will be answered here on these lines below is, what songs did you discuss with your group? List them on the lines below. And of course, they can share these things with the class. How would you categorize them? That is, the music that they discuss. Would it fall under the category of a positive influence? And this is where they would put the type of song that it was, or the name of the song. Or would it fall under a category of a negative influence? And then lastly there, why did you choose to put these songs in their respective categories? If they've been paying attention and if they've been learning, their answer would be based off of the positive and negative things that they've learned, or what classifies something as positive or negative from what they've learned from this point all the way back through to chapter 1. Okay, and so that would be what we will cover there on page 67. Now let's look over here to let's see here, page 68, under music and violence. Music and violence. It says the following excerpt was taken from Richard C. Monk's Taking Sides, Clashing Views on Controversial Issues in Crime and Criminology, and that was found on page 37 here of his books. He says this is only one example of the powerful influence music has on its listeners. And it says here, this is an excerpt here, it says, while on patrol in July 1992, 2 Las Vegas police officers were ambushed and shot by 4 juvenile delinquents who boasted that Ice-T's Cop Killer, which was a popular newly released rap song, gave them a sense of duty and purpose to get even with the police. The juveniles continued to sing its lyrics when apprehended, okay? And people don't realize how powerful music can be. Now, not everybody who listens to, a song in that nature will go out and, shoot a police officer or go out and attack their ex or something like that, or go out and rob a store or a bank or anything like that. Not everybody will carry out the things that they hear in these songs, but that doesn't change the fact that these influences, these lyrics, because these guys they weren't just talking about the beat, right? They weren't saying that, this rapper's song had a really great beat to it, but the lyrics that was presented in that song impressed in their minds that they had a sense of duty, right? They had a sense of duty and purpose to get even with the police. Now, you could probably guess what the basis of that song was. Look at the title of it, Cop Killer, right? It didn't say cop supporter or, cop being obedient or obeying the law or anything. It expressed right there the purpose or the intention of that song, okay? And a lot of young people, they listen to these things because a lot of times because their friends listen to them, right? Sometimes, like I said before, it is because it's a great beat, okay? When I was growing up, and you don't hear it very much out here in the country, you don't even really hear it very much in Abilene, but, it was not uncommon. I mean, and I guess it's still a big thing. I haven't heard it in so long, I don't even know. But, people would spend $500 on a car, and then they spend another $10,000 on a stereo system, and then they'd be going down the street at all hours of the morning, boom, 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 and everything in that vehicle was rattling, right? Even in your house was rattling. It was just all this, and a lot of times they selected the songs because of the amount of bass that they had, right? But that didn't take away the negative lyrics that were being, presented in that song. The fact that they were going through the neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning, trying to turn, car alarms would actually be going off. Dogs would be barking, alarms would be going off on houses and things like that. It shows they didn't have respect for their neighbor, okay? And of course, they weren't taught these things, but these are an example of things that lyrics that were mentioned in the song that I'm sure had a really great beat that influenced these 4 young juveniles to go and ambush 4 police officers. I don't know. This was something I don't know. I learned this. It's been some years ago. It's not my genre of music, so to speak. But how many of you have ever heard of moshing or mosh pits, right? I was like, yeah. When I saw this, physically saw this, and being done, I thought, wow, that looks like that's very painful, and that's kind of the purpose of the thing. But moshing it's a style of dance in which participants push or slam into each other, typically performed to aggressive live music. So the purpose of the band is to really get the people riled up, really get them, agitated and excited, because if you're not leaving a mosh pit with a bloody nose and bruised eye, you didn't have a really great time, right? But people don't see the influence. Now, I like to listen to music and kind of relax. I don't want to get beat up, right? But, this goes back to, the things that people value, right? They haven't been taught. It says moshing usually occurs in the center of the crowd, generally closer to the stage in an area called the pit, or it's called the mosh pit. It is intended to be energetic and full body contact. In fact, let's see here if I can. This is an example of a mosh pit or a mosh, and you can just see all these people here. It looks like somebody just got hit by a car, and bodies are flying, but that's exactly what they do. They jump all over each other, and they slam into each other, and people get kicked in the face, and people get bloody noses and bloody eyes and things like that. Remember how we categorize positive and negative, right? What will be a right choice? What will be a wrong choice? A right choice is one that doesn't bring harm to you or somebody else, right? That looks like a lot of people were harmed in the making of that mosh, okay? And so, but people don't think about it because they're so caught up in the emotion, right? We talked about how music has the ability to affect your emotions, right? And then your emotions have the ability to affect the way you act. And that's the whole purpose of even that type of style of dance and music and so forth. So, if anybody does listen to it, I would encourage you to, maybe select something a little more classical or beneficial or peaceful, because that will fall under the category of a negative influence. It says, keep in mind that not all movies, songs, or even video games are violent or inappropriate. I don't know that anybody was moshing to Bach or Beethoven. It could be possible. I don't know. But I think you can make any positive thing negative, given the situation. Bring negative aspects into it. It says, even if you were to eliminate all movies, songs, and video games, there would still be other negative influences, okay? Outside of wherever there's people, there's always going to be, outside of nature, I guess I should say, because nature has the ability to influence us. Anytime you interact with people, there's going to be an opportunity for negative influences. Anything that people have something to do with, like I mentioned about billboards, because those are designed by people, right? Ads and things like that, those are designed by people, right? There would still be other negative influences. You have to be responsible and determine how you are being influenced. And that's up to us, right? And like I said before, the only way that we can fall into this category of being responsible is first and foremost educate ourselves about the difference between what's positive and what's negative. And then, like we're talking about in this chapter, the making of a VIP, we need to value the things that are beneficial, right? The things that build up our character, that help us in the development of a positive character, that help us to be safe, that help us to maintain our positive values and to become the very best person that we can be in contributing to society or our families or our schools and things of that nature. Keep your eyes and ears open to the world around you. Constantly ask yourself, is what I'm seeing or hearing worth valuing, right? If something is valuable to you, it means it's important to you, right? And even if there is something that a person might value, because when you're teaching children, they're going to fall into the things they listen to are going to fall into the category of negative influences. Our goal isn't to say, you're a bad person because you listen to that particular rapper or that artist, or, you watch these types of movies. It's merely to point out to them the difference between the things that are beneficial and harmful to them, because they have to make the decision. They have to make the choice to bring about a change in their life so they can develop a positive character. They have to see the value of developing and maintaining a positive character. And then once they see that, that's why we laid that foundation at the very beginning of the unit there. Once they see that, then they're going to more closely monitor the things that are presented to them, the things that come into their lives, the influences that they receive. And they will work on eliminating those harmful things and accentuating and building on the positive ones. Is something worth practicing? Okay. Will it help me to achieve what I want out of life? And that's very important. We usually ask the students many times, what is it that you're wanting out of life? What is it that you're wanting to accomplish? What is it? How do you determine success, right? And we talked a little bit about that at the very beginning of the unit of the chapter here, because if they don't, which we'll get into a little later, if they don't have a goal, if they don't understand their purpose, then they can be, it's more likely they'll subject themselves to whatever comes along, right? If they don't know what they're wanting to achieve out of life, if they don't have a positive goal or a direction in which to strive for, then whatever comes their way, they say it's great for the goose, it's great for the gander, okay? My friends are doing it. They seem to be successful. If we're measuring success based on your friends, well, it might be time to try and change the standards there a little bit. If the answer to any one of these questions is no, then choose not to see it or hear it. It is up to you to make obtaining a moral character your number one value, okay? And again, choose not to see or hear it. That is on your part, right? You can't take certain things out of your environment, but you can choose what you focus on. You can choose if you go and put that CD into the CD player, or if you choose to download or to click on a video with a particular song or something like that. That's completely each individual's choice. Okay, so let's see here. Just want to make sure I got all these things covered. All right, let's look over to page 69. Page 69. Yeah, and that kind of will finish out this entertainment part here. And so these are some of the things that we want to remember, get our students to remember in these 4 little blocks here. It says violence in, violence out. Remember, our brains are kind of like, we compared it before, kind of like a field, a field of soil, right? If you plant a potato in the soil, you're going to get a potato plant, right? If you plant a weed in the soil, you're going to get a weed plant. Now, how many people, generally speaking, plant weeds in their garden? Not very many people, right? But does that stop weeds from growing in the garden? The negative influences are always there, right? The negative influences, like weeds, right, that can choke out or harm the beneficial things, they're always there. But it's up to, in this case, consciously, us being the gardener or the farmer, to go through the field and pick out those things that choke out positive character, or the things that will build and support positive character. In this case, it would be negative influences, right? If it's violence through movies or video games, don't watch violent movies or play violent video games, right? If it's aggressive, violent lyrics and music, well, don't listen to those things, right? It might seem like it's hard, but it's really not that hard. The challenge is our desire to listen to it, because we've made it so much a part of us, right? And it's like any habit, it takes time to overcome it and quit it. But we have to start somewhere, right? The journey of 1,000 miles starts with the first step. Because if we allow those influences to be placed in our mind, then over time, eventually, that's what's going to come out, right? You're going to revert to your training. Whether you realize it or not, society is training you with their influences. Right? The things that you value is what's being deeply rooted in the soil of your mind, so to speak. And eventually, when given the opportunity and the space and the environment, that weed's going to pop out and it's going to dominate your thoughts. Those negative influences are going to dominate your thoughts when the situation arises. So pluck out those violent influences and replace them with positive, peaceful influences, and that's what you'll get out of it. It says here, this was a statistic that I think it was back in, it might have been 94. I don't remember the exact date. I was looking it up a little earlier. And I don't know, I don't think really, I haven't been able to find if anybody's done any new studies based on this, because when you look this up, you still find these same numbers. But I would say, to some degree, this is the number is larger because of the times that we're in and what's become more acceptable in society. But the one thing that this takes only into consideration is television. Okay, this statistic right here to the right, it says the average 18-year-old will have watched over 200,000 acts of violence on TV alone. Okay, and I would think that that number is a bit higher now, from the last 26 or so years, because there's a lot more acts of violence on television, right? I mean, all the different shows, the detective shows and things like that that come on now that weren't on 20 something years ago, all depict acts of violence. Even if they're solving a crime, they show the crime, which is an act of violence. But then you take into consideration, on top of this, the computer, what you can get right from a cell phone, social media sites, right? And then the video games, which we talked about previously, they're just loaded with acts of violence. So you take 200,000 of the acts of violence that are seen on the TV, and a lot of young people, they're not all the time sitting in front of a television. They're in front of their laptop, their tablet, or their telephone, right? And they're watching all these things, these things streaming, as William covered in the last class, influence to stream in, or stream right into their mind, a program that's downloading right into their mind. And it's probably exponentially larger than 200,000. It might be over 1 million by the time that they're 18 now. But it says approximately 4 million adolescents have been victims of a serious assault, and 9 million have witnessed serious violence during their lifetime. And this does not only have to come from television, because you remember what we covered in chapter 2, the effects of character within the family, that some of these things are actually displayed in the home, in the family, with domestic violence and abuse and so forth. Even if the child themselves was not abused, if they witnessed that taking place between the parents, then that affected them. That had an impact on them. That was a part of their experience growing up. And then lastly there, it says movie studios, record companies, and video game producers are aggressively marketing violent entertainment products to children. And remember, we talked about children, or entertainment, I mean, they're, a way of thinking, or to hold in the mind, to maintain in a certain condition. And so they keep putting these things out so that people keep buying their products, right? And young people are just a part of the demographic that buys these video games. There's a lot of older people, particularly older men, average age I think is around their 40s, that just suck up these video games, And you know how influential a video game is. It's funny because it was one day this was a long time ago, and I used to play video games, and I would watch the people that I would play video games with, after I lost and I had to set my turn out. And I would watch them. They would be so aggressive in the game. If it was a driving game, they'd have the controller and they're, like they're really turning the steering wheel. But you don't stop and think. Your subconscious mind thinks you're driving that car, right? And that's just a driving game, like a racing game or something like that, And they're giving it all they got, like they're really cranking on that steering wheel. Now, what about when they're behind a first-person shooter game, right? Where they have to go and kill a target as a sniper. How do you think that that's impacting the mind? It thinks that it's really doing that, right? Right, and they're being desensitized to the act of violence, the sights, the thoughts of violence and doing harm to other people. To where if the situation arose and the opportunity presented themselves, they could easily pick up a gun and shoot somebody and not think anything about it. Because they've already trained their mind to do that. They've already accepted that that's an okay thing to do because the influence has been placed in there so greatly, they valued it, and it's become a part of it. So that's why it's important that we guard our minds, and we're careful to determine whether the things that we hear, we see, we listen to, we value are positive or negative, and make those adjustments. Life is about making adjustments. Developing a positive character is about continuously making adjustments, evaluating and making adjustments in our thought process and our actions, so that we can produce the effect of developing a positive character. And that's important for us to know, and that's important to impart to our students, because we have to let them know it's not going to be an instant change, but if they will continue to work at it and to educate themselves, eventually this will be the end result, developing and maintaining a positive character that will benefit themselves and society. So we're going to stop right there on page 69 and pick up on page 70. Our next class will be not four, I'm already into the fourth month of April. It'll be the 7th, this upcoming Sunday at 5:30 Central Standard Time. We look forward to seeing you then. Have a great evening.